first half of the slides, and then when we get to the results, Miguel will read those slides. The title of our presentation is Reading While Listening, Students' Attitudes and Actions. And go on to the next slide. This research project started with a stimulus from last year's conference. Last year, we heard a presentation from Campbell, Kalman, and Campbell. They reported on students' experiences of listening to audio narration while doing extensive reading. And the students' experiences were good. We wanted our students to experience the audio while reading. Two important studies that have informed our research are summarized on this slide. The first is by Chang and Millett in Taiwan, and they compared reading rates and comprehension of two groups, an audio-assisted group and a silent reading group. Both groups increased in reading speed and comprehension. However, the audio-assisted group was significantly higher in both measurements. And then another study by Brent Milliner, who compared TOEIC reading and listening scores from two groups, an audio-assisted group and a silent reading group. He found the audio-assisted group performed better than the silent reading group. Before I go any farther, I'd like to clarify some terminology. In our title, we use reading while listening, and this term is commonly used in L2 education to mean reading with audio assistance. However, it can grammatically be viewed as a focus on listening, and we do not intend that. So we've grown to use the term audio-assisted reading, which is listening that supports the reading. The main element is the reading. So we had 4 research questions. The first one is, will students who have experienced audio-assisted reading choose to continue to listen to audio even when they're not required? We required them to. Would they choose to listen when they are not required? The second question, does the experience of audio-assisted reading influence students' sense of enjoyment of extensive reading? 3, does the experience of audio-assisted reading influence students' evaluation of the worth of extensive reading? And 4, does audio-assisted reading influence students' ability to concentrate on reading? The participants were 143 Japanese university freshmen. Their majors were global management, food and health, or child development. They were doing extensive reading via Xreading for 1 year, and it's 10% of their grade each quarter. There were 16 students' data that were removed from the study because they completed less than 50% of the reading assignment. These students are doing extensive reading for 1 academic year. Our university uses a quarter system. And so in quarter 1, the students were introduced to extensive reading. Then in quarter 2, they had 2 20,000-word reading assignments. In quarter 3, they had 2 30,000-word reading assignments, and the same in quarter 4. The treatment we did was all in quarter 3. And at the start of quarter 3, the students were given an assignment that explained the benefits of audio-assisted reading. So they were looking at a website and reading and listening to information about audio-assisted reading, and all the information was in Japanese. The materials on this website included a Japanese video. It also included written explanations of audio-assisted learning. There were some very brief summaries of English research on audio-assisted reading. And then, most importantly, Miguel made a video that demonstrated how to use the audio functions on Xreading, particularly how to change the speed of the audio. And now Miguel is going to show you that website.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. So this was an example. This is basically the exact same website we used. We used Microsoft Sway. And you can see here, these are the Japanese explanations of the benefits of audio-assisted reading. We have the summary points from the research and some external links that students could also visit if they wanted to learn more. Here we have some of the quotations from the research, some of the research that we used for our paper, and some of the student opinions as well for why they chose to listen to audio in Xreading. The video here is just a YouTuber giving their explanation for the benefits of listening to audio while reading. And the last part here was the assignment where students had to answer questions about audio-assisted reading on a Microsoft form. And at the final part here, we have the reference that were used for this research.
So in Q3, in the first week, the students looked at that website and learned about the value of audio-assisted reading. And then we had the extensive reading assignments. And so in Q3, the first reading assignment was 26 days. The goal was to read 30,000 words, and the students were required to read and listen to the audio narration. Then their second reading assignment, the second half of the quarter, 26 days, reading 30,000 words, the students could choose reading only or listening to audio while reading. We also did a questionnaire with a 4-point Likert scale at the beginning of Q3 and the end of Q3. This was conducted in class. The questions targeted perceived value, enjoyment, and concentration in extensive reading. And all the questions were in Japanese, so it was easy for the students to complete. At the very end, we did interviews with 8 students. The interviewees were selected based on their choice to read only or to do audio-assisted reading. So 4 of each. The length of the interviews is 20 minutes each, and these interviews were conducted in Japanese. And now Miguel will share our results.
Okay, thank you again, Cheryl. So the important part of this research, what were students' actions and attitudes to audio-assisted reading? Now, the summary of the Xreading data is here. You can see in the first reading assignment, the average reading time was 4 hours, 24 minutes, and the average listening time was 2 hours, 33 minutes. Now, unfortunately, it was not a one-to-one reading to listening time. As Cheryl explained in our treatment, we did push students to listen. We monitored the data. We would set them aside, pull them aside and say, hey, you need to listen. In my classes, we had reading time where I could help students and just really get them started with audio-assisted reading. And, you know, some students did, some students, no matter how much you tried to convince them, they did not. Now, in the second reading assignment, you can see the average reading time went down a little, 4 hours and 4 minutes, and your listening time dropped by about 1 hour. Now, keep in mind, this is in the second reading assignment, this was optional to listen. Like we told them you must listen in the first half, but in the second assignment, it's completely up to you to listen or not to listen. Okay, now The data is summarized here. 48% of all students in the first reading assignment did over 3 hours of audio assisted reading. In the second half, this number dropped to about 30% of students. So on average, there was a 1 hour drop, but still there was a large number of students who continued to listen while reading. Now, 47% of students still did at least 1 hour of audio assisted reading. So it was not a 0 or 3 sort of ratio, the distribution between the data. Now, in the questionnaires and in the interviews, we asked students, why did you prefer reading only for those students who did reading only? Some of the answers were like this. The student felt rushed to keep up with the audio, and it became exhausting for them. The second point here, I think, is very important. The students said they would get frustrated when I saw words I didn't understand and wanted to look them up in a dictionary. So I had to stop and start quite often. Now, when you see a quote like this, I think it's really a big signal to instructors that there are students who still don't fully understand the methodology or the purpose of extensive reading. And it is always important to sort of remind students of why we do these. If you have to use a dictionary, you're reading above your level. Okay, and the final quote here is, it felt too chaotic to listen and read at the same time. So this student here preferred to read only or listen only, but never both. Now, this is interesting too, because when you think about learner profiles, naturally, there are some students that just prefer one or the other, not both. Now, the students who did prefer audio-assisted reading gave the following reasons. They said, I found it easier to understand the story. I could tell when different characters were talking and feel the emotional expressions. I enjoyed listening to the performative English. It felt like watching a movie. And this one here, it was good practice to listen to various English accents. Now, the student who said this was actually intending to go to the UK for her study abroad program. So she said specifically listening to these books with different accents really helped her with her English. Now, as for the sense of enjoyment, looking at the questionnaire data, we did use a 4-point Likert scale. So a score of 1 is very low, 4 is strongly agree. The average score for enjoying English books basically barely changed. It was a very, very small change from 2.9 to 3.01. Now, what did the students enjoy about listening while reading? Well, again, it was very similar to some of the answers we got in one. The background noises, okay, like the main character. So I feel like I become the character. Reading becomes fun. The student here said, my ear became used to listening to English. And this final quote here, I can notice pronunciation that I have taught before. Now, for this example, the student said they were taught pronunciations in classes a while ago, I think in senior high school, and it didn't really click the things they were taught until they started listening in large volume and hearing these different pronunciations. Other things that affected their enjoyment: understand character distinctions and emotions. And this here was a negative part for the enjoyment. It takes more time because you cannot skip pages when in a hurry to complete an assignment. So it was more time consuming for a student to listen and read as opposed to skimming through a book. I'll talk about that again later. Now, question 3, does the experience influence students' evaluation of extensive reading? Now, we were quite surprised in our research. This was a very significant jump from 3.15 to 3.54. This was the biggest increase out of all the questionnaire questions. So good English practice. Now, in our interviews, when we did ask the students about this, a lot of them came back to the point that it's more fun. And if you can enjoy this, you want to read more. So other unique quotes here were, "It helps me understand in one reading." Now, what this student meant was when they were reading for Xreading before doing audio assisted reading, because they really wanted to pass the quiz at the end of reading a book, they would reread parts they didn't really fully understand. But thanks to the audio assisted reading, they did it one and done. They never had to backtrack on what they read. Another student we interviewed was very, very enthusiastic about audio assisted reading, and she increased the audio speed to challenge herself to read faster, which was very, very impressive. Now, in terms of concentration, there was a slight increase here, 3.08 to 3.35. I find myself absorbed in reading English books when I'm doing Xreading. Now, these were, again, similar ideas that we had in questions 1 and 2. Because the audio continues to play, so if I don't concentrate hard, I cannot continue to understand. So having the audio flow puts pressure on the students to really focus and zone in on what they are reading. Audio assisted reading requires concentration, so at the end of a book, I felt exhausted. I could only read one book a day. Now, several students did talk about this. Maybe if you monitor your Xreading data, you can see that some of your students, the day before a deadline, their reading just shoots up to 5 hours in one day. And we did ask some students about this, and it wasn't really because they were cramming, but for them, when they start reading, this is what one student said, they go in English mode, and it helps them read books nonstop and really focus in on books. But because they were doing audio assisted reading, it was very hard to do this nonstop because they physically felt exhausted. So only one book a day was what they were saying, but actually that's what they should be doing with Xreading. Some students had a hard time focusing because of environmental factors, such as living with roommates or living with family members. Another interviewee told us that her mom would constantly try talking to her when she had earphones on. That's just some social factors that students need to think about. Now, as for limitations of our research, unfortunately, we did this project in 2021 when our students were still studying online. So you can imagine doing 4 or 5 online classes, sitting on your computer the whole day and thinking, okay, now I'm going to start doing Xreading. After a day of sitting in front of your computer, there's definitely screen fatigue would play a large part in some of the students' answers. The Likert scale was all self-reported data, so take it out with a grain of salt. Some students were just maybe trying to be nice with their answers. And the 4-point Likert scale also doesn't accurately portray if students who were big fans of Xreading, who really enjoyed Xreading, if all their answers were strongly agree for the first half, then and it improved in the second half, you would not see a change in the data there. So as an experience, overall, I think the research was quite successful. 30% of students still listening over 3 hours, I think was a big, big change. Making listening a requirement for 26 days, the first reading assignment, was a very big, crucial part of this. We can see here in quarter 2, me and Cheryl actually did tell our students, hey, if you want to, please try to use the listening part of Xreading. It's a lot of valuable material here. And only 3% of students attempted listening. Okay, now this is a very different to what we had in quarter 3, where we gave them Japanese material. When we say you must do this, the results speak for themselves. Okay, I think that's our time up. So, so just as a conclusion, Japanese instructions, give them support, monitor their data, try to catch the stragglers, and tell them, show them the benefits, and I'm sure you can find students will enjoy this a whole lot more. Now, as a final message, we were very fortunate that our research was published in the Reading Matrix Journal. It will be in the August issue of the Reading Matrix. The title is the same title of the paper is the same title of our presentation, Audio Assisted Extensive Reading, Learners' Experience and Attitude. So if you'd like to read more about our research and the gritty data, the nuts and bolts, it will be there in the journal article. Okay, so that's all for our presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. That was very interesting. Very nice. I guess you can stop your screen share.
Yeah.
Go. Oops. Stop.
So there's, let's see. Miguel, we can take turns looking at the questions in chat. There's a question. Let's see.
Oh, my chat just disappeared.
My Zoom's acting funny. Can someone just forcefully stop my screen share?
Yeah, it stopped.
I stopped it.
Okay.
Oh,
Stop-
okay.
Oh.
Okay, I'll read the first question here. Tom Rob asks, I wonder whether the students were all listening concurrently to the same audio, or were they reading and listening at their own pace? All the reading was primarily done outside the classroom, so students were choosing their own books, and so they were all reading different books and reading and listening at their own pace. And because we use extensive reading as a way to engage our students in English at their level outside the classroom, they are choosing to read outside the classroom, choosing to read, and we knew that they would need some extra help if they were going to choose to do the listening also. So yes, they were doing it at their own pace. Next, Xreading. Okay, then